government's efforts will ensure not only that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
Largement du développement et du déploiement rapide de diagnostics, vaccins et traitements efficaces.
Universal access to vaccination, treatment, and diagnostics.
Equitable access to new COVID diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine.
We must all work together on improving diagnostics, accelerating therapies, and ultimately developing a vaccine.
We need to make vaccines, treatment, and diagnostics accessible to everyone.
Vaccines, treatments, and diagnosis will be the most effective way to do it.
We need new diagnostics, vaccines, treatments, and an equal distribution to all.
On equitable access to diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines.
And affordability of the vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
In order to develop adequate treatments and vaccines.
Better diagnostics, treatments, and a safe and effective vaccine.
But will you, as the Chief Medical Officer of Health, in any way make some sort of mandatory vaccination recommendation?
So similar to all our immunization programs in the province of Ontario, and we have some special acts related to that, like the Immunization of School Pupils Act, etc. We can't force someone to take a vaccine. That's clear, and because we want to make sure that people say they only would want it. And we want to make sure we have all the information they need, as well as all the safety information, etc. What we can do is to say sometimes for access or ease in getting into certain settings, if you don't have vaccination, then you're not allowed into that setting without other protection and promote materials. So what may be mandatory is proof of immunization or vaccination with a proper product in order to have latitude and freedom to move around in certain, like to access into long-term care facilities or the hospital, different things, without wearing other types of form of personal protective equipment, etc. Same as with school attendance. It may be much like our other vaccines. We haven't gone there yet, but we would make it mandatory for access in, and sometimes being excluded if there's a risk or a hazard going on. So it's more of facility of movement and around that, not that someone is going to be forced to take it against their will.
Hello there, welcome. Thank you for dropping by again. And here we go with yet another SARS-CoV-2 video. Boy, I thought I was going to be done with these. Anyway, we're going to look just kind of directly at the vaccine business that's going on today. And of course, that was David Williams, Chief Medical Officer of Ontario, bullshitting you with his, oh, we won't make it mandatory, horse crap. And why I would say that right off the get-go is I'll bring your attention to the fact that we are at day 270 something since the middle of March, when it was said a couple of weeks, flatten the curve, good to go. 200 and some odd days later, we're still doing the same thing and still knocking it down. And there's zero evidence to justify what they're doing. There is no, you can't justify taking people's rights anyway, because they don't grant them. They are just infringing. Anyway, I'm going to go off on a tangent there, but we'll stick with it. So anyway, we'll just a quick, kind of call that the pre-flight, but we need, again, this is from a previous video I had, and I just want to review this again. Despite the best efforts of the media and government, we need to change the narrative away from cases. I've written 2 or 3 or 4 or 300 articles on it, done a bunch of videos on this case business, gone up and down and through, and it's being completely misused in order to stoke fear and to keep this whole thing going. The next one here is a positive assay, and that's the PCR. It is not a test. Don't let them tell you what constantly that it's a test. It is not a test. They all use the term test. It is an assay. It's a manufacturing tool. It is not a test. A positive assay result does not mean the person is sick, will get sick, or has the potential to be a virus shedder that can affect others. This is right in the documentation of the tests, like right in the notes, man. Good gravy. The term case plants a negative assumption in people's minds, which absolutely, especially when you're using that, because we think case, we think it's people dying in sickness and stuff, when this is not the case. The number of individuals requiring hospitalization, I put that in kind of a bold there, because you get people showing up in this day and age, and they perceive they're having some problems, but they've been documented that there are anxiety disorders and panic attacks and things going on, stress, depression, items that they're connected to COVID-2 or whatever the thing is. So these are requiring the hospitalization because they've got some sort of respiratory thing going on. So that's one barometer, and that's really of the threat, not the cases. Again, cases mean nothing. They've completely turned that into, really, it's a case of beer. That's it. In Canada, beer, period. So the next one, the threat is the hospitalizations, but the fatalities are the danger. Fatalities are the ultimate danger, because it's kind of pretty much the end of the line there. And so that is really the key of the threat of anything, is the perishing. And we're not seeing that happen either. So the bottom line here, with the exception of the always present outliers, the fatality statistics are all that really matters. And again, full stop, period. None of this case business. Throw this in the garbage, turn off your TV. This thing will go away, well, by the time you turn the news off. So I want to look at two other items here very quickly. We're just going to go right through here because these are issues that affect people when they take information in. One is called the halo effect, and it's the tendency for a positive impression of a person, company, brand, or product in one area to positively influence one's opinion. And we're all, I'm sure, very familiar with this. We see somebody the way they look versus somebody else the way they look, and then we automatically make a judgment, kind of on that. It's a shortcut. It's not a great thing, but it is a thing, and it's a real thing, and so on and so forth. So a good example there, I guess, would be someone with credentials in a certain field. They're dressed nice, they're looking good, and we're talking about that field, versus the person at the coffee shop. So the idea would be, in my personal opinion anyway, instead of using this stuff as kind of the halo effect, use it actually as a categorization effect, rather. And so it's a sort order. So again, back to the coffee shop thing, some dude or dudette sitting in the coffee shop talking about something versus somebody who, claims to have and can prove that they've got some credentials in it and so on and so forth, meaning that they have a little bit of knowledge at least in it. So in terms of dismissing both of them, you don't, but you actually just move one or up and down the list of priority. And you may not give any leeway to the person in the coffee shop because you might find everything you want in the previous people. But just use them as a sort order in terms of information that you're going to take in, but not the end all to beat all, and not just because they wear a nice suit and they got a bunch of letters behind their name. That means absolutely nothing, and I'm going to show that going further. So that kind of ties in there with the argument from authority, and that's the other. You put those two together, so you put somebody who is perceived as authority, and then you dress them all nice, and then puts a bunch of letters behind their name, and suddenly we're like, oh yeah, okay, well, they know what they're talking about. When in reality, we don't even know anything about these people, period. So how do we know what they're talking about? Well, you need to follow it up again on your own. Belief bias is something else that we all have here too, and it's just basically the tendency to judge the strength of an argument based on the plausibility of their conclusion rather than how strongly they support it. So we want it to be some that, if I have a certain way of looking at things, I am then going to say, well, somebody making an argument, yeah, that sounds plausible, that's good. Even if the argument is full of holes in terms of factuality, it's got none, but it just sounds good. It makes, that kind of thing. We have to be very cognizant of this. This is very common, and it's, as they actually put in the Wikipedia thing here, belief bias is an extremely common and therefore significant form of error. We all do this continuously, and we have to be on guard of this. So anyway, let's get rolling here, because I don't want to spend the entire day rambling away like I usually do. So let's just bring a little context here in the backdrop. So this is what we're looking at in terms of death, and I will actually, 2 slides here, interesting thing here, but nonetheless. So we can see that we've got still the big bulge in the beginning of the year. And we can see now we've got kind of an up and down yo-yo here in the fall, which interestingly enough, of course, this is flu season. So we have the same thing, although we'll see there's some shenanigans going on with that as well. Boy, it's a crazy world. So that it's interesting here, if you know this, to be a little closer up here. This gives you the illusion of 2 waves too. And because we didn't start testing until, January or February or March or whenever it began in there. So if this thing had been going on like a usual flu, and I have no doubt that it was, then, this first and second wave, it's basically the same wave. Right? It's just the tail end of one and the beginning of another, as you see with the flu season, because it does the exact same thing. It's also very interesting to note here, this is from the province of Ontario, how they put the fatalities, which is the danger. The ultimate is dying, right? That's a pretty big bad end. And they put it in gray, and yet we use, when we're talking about cases, we put that in red. Well, let me tell you, folks, I don't have to tell you. I'll just ask you. When was the last time that people used red for non-danger, non-threat? Active means nothing in this case. It just means they haven't got a conclusion. Why do we put that in red? Well, if you wanted to push a thing and keep people scared shitless, that's a good way to do it too, is keep all that stuff in red. CBC does the same thing. Province of Ontario, Region of Waterloo, brutal. Absolutely brutal. So we're not going to spend too much time looking here. Just wanted to get some context of what's going on. And we can see we have, an increase going through. This is from December 3rd back to, I think it went back to October or so. We can see kind of a bit of an increase in terms of the death statistics. So we do have something going on there. So let's take a peek at what's happening here. One good barometer here, as I mentioned before, which would be very helpful in getting some perspective, or I guess some comparison, because humans need comparison in order to kind of come up with a lot of conclusions. Random numbers don't mean anything unless we've got something to compare them to. So the influenza or flu would be a fantastic way to do something just like that. So let's get that from the... Oh, I see. All right, so the province of Ontario has decided they're not doing the data on the flu. Isn't that funny? Boy, oh boy. Now, I went back to check to see if I could find a copy on... Wayback Machine, Internet Archive there, but they didn't have one. So unfortunately, I don't know whether this was here last year, the year before, or so on. I just find it very interesting that this data, which would be a great fit for what's happening right now, is suddenly not available. Isn't that something? So the feds have some data there. So all indicators of influenza activity remain exceptionally low for this time of year, despite continued monitoring. Okay. To date, there is no evidence of community detection and circulation of influenza. So interesting how influenza completely disappeared, just like that. Isn't that remarkable? Boy, oh boy. So we've had it for close to 5,000 years, they figure, and here it is gone, just in the year that... So there is some... I did read something a long time ago. I haven't gone back to investigate it. At some point in time, I will. But the idea was that one flu will push out another. So if you have a one strain, it tends to push out another one. I need to get more information on that to go. But clearly, we've got some things going on here because now there's no flu. Well, that just strikes me as being very odd that can just completely disappear just like that. And of course, of all years for this to happen, this one. Isn't that funny? So this is just basically the Ontario database. I pull it down every once in a while and then just run it through my little... thing called PHP admin, just run some SQL queries on it. So I just, again, wanted to get some context of, the news is breathlessly going on about deaths, increasing deaths, but what are they? Again, statistical analysis. I'm not trying to be cold or callous here. We're looking at statistics and numbers. We're not necessarily talking directly about individual people here at this point. So when I say only and just and all that kind of stuff, it's in the context of statistical analysis, period. So we can see we actually have one person in the 30s group. Don't really know the case acquisition. The OB is for outbreak, and that's the common one. But if you notice in the list there, we only have 1, 2, 3 below 70. Boy, oh boy, isn't that interesting? Now, interestingly enough, too, the WHO considers high-risk group at 60, but I actually go as high as 70 because I meet some pretty decent 60-year-olds. I'm going to be coming up on one in a couple of years, so not a few years yet, but will be one. And so I've done kind of both, and basically you can see where it actually doesn't change all that much, even when you drop it down to 50 or to the 60s. So that started at December 3rd there. We can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more that are below 60s and below in this particular case. We only have, is that our first? Yeah, our first one below 20. That was even a fatality. And this speaks directly to societal child abuse that's going on to our children in the schools with the masks on, because we haven't it hasn't affected them at all. And yet we are, as a society, as a group, as the teachers, as parents or whatever, we're sending them off with their masks. We're telling them that their friends are scary and terrible. Don't talk to them. Look front face, can't be close to people. It's ridiculous. This is societal child abuse. We should be ashamed of ourselves for this. There's no justification at all, period, for any of that. None. I mean, it's absolutely astounding that we're letting it happen. It's just ridiculous. But here we can keep on going all the way through. So this is where they're claiming, this is in the case of Ontario too, the deaths are going up. But guess where it is? Again, the OB is outbreak, and that tends to be in the long-term care, majority. And this, again, I can see why they try to push this away, because the province, in case of Ontario, and in case of Canada, the provinces and or regions, depending on what it is, are responsible for long-term care. And it has been a carnage. And of course, these people are never going to want the focus back on them, because theoretically, they should be in jail for this. I'm going to do another, I've been working on a video there strictly on long-term care, particularly in the Riviera one. Yeah, okay, that's had a huge impact on there. Waterloo region, they had the largest, another day. So here we have, again, we can see that it's the same pattern, exactly the same pattern. It's in the high-risk group, and then of that high-risk group, generally within the long-term care, not in the general population, much like they won't, because that's why I switched to cases, right? Because the fatalities are basically what you would expect for this type of thing in this type of year. It's flu season, man, and all this stuff going on. But yet that's why we focus on cases, because the death count has not kept up with their narrative of this death and destruction thing. And so therefore now we focus on the cases, because that's a much more scary number, even though it means absolutely nothing. These people are shameless and need to be arrested. So here we have, this is in Canada. Interesting enough, look at that dotted line. These are weekly death counts. They're dropping. They're actually lower. So I would assume there's going to be some adjustment here. But boy, oh boy. Yeah, okay. This is a little closer here too, and this is all of Canada. Same thing. Look at the bulge there that we saw, and yet now we're dropping. So unless there's some massive adjustments here, I don't see this going any higher than a normal everyday year. And this is the average weekly death counts. Not average, these are the weekly death counts based on death certificates in Canada. So we can look at it a little bit closer here. This is tight. I've just grabbed, basically the chart was too big to fit, so I just grabbed them and then dumped them all in a spreadsheet in columns instead of rows to give us an idea here. So we can certainly see the bulge in the center area. That was back in the March and April. And you know, we see all ages. We have excess fatality here of 698 showing. Majority of them in the 45 to 64 and 65 and so on. And of course, 85 and up, it's actually a drop, but that makes sense because you're going to have a limited amount of population that are 85 and older in terms of the big picture. And once they're perished, they're not replaced as quickly. So therefore, you're running out of actual people. And so therefore, you know, you're going to end up with that idea. But 698. Now, what this doesn't tell us, and we can see here that, you know, again, I just pulled this out. This is that bulging area in April-ish. What this data does not tell us is why these were excess fatalities. That's all. It doesn't. It just says there's more. But it could be anything. What are these? You know, what are they? The result of the lockdowns, the cancellation of treatment, surgery, the stress, mental health. Jeez. How many were rushed onto ventilators, right? Ventilators kill. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And there's been some well-documented articles on that if you want to go take a peek. And they were rushed onto ventilators, which may have killed them, right? It had nothing to do with COVID. It just so happened to be they were with it or not. So what were the effects of early drug treatments on this vulnerable population? Where you start dumping these drugs in, and then they have counter side effects and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the good old standby, how many were classified as a from COVID instead of a with COVID. And this is very interesting here as we go on to the next one. This was the original, the top one. Deaths are determined, this is so their weekly thingy from Ontario, determined by the outcome in the IFAS. So they've changed from IFAS to CCM, which is a different database reporting system. But notice how they've got any case marked as fatal is included in the death data, but then they changed. Deaths are included whether or not COVID was determined to be a contributing or underlying cause of death. Now it reads the CCM field type of death is not used to further categorize the data. In other words, they're saying the exact same thing, but they're removing the COVID bit out of there because it was tricking, you know, it wasn't tricking people. People were all over this because the CDC did the same thing. And so say, you know, what you do end up with is, you know, someone dying with it, but not from it or as a direct result of it. But it's interesting to see that Ontario has changed that wording in there, sneaky. So let's look at the people who are now dictating ours, particularly this Mr. David Williams. So I want to find out what he's all about since he wants to force people into doing stuff, and we'll get an idea of how that really is going to work down the future here. So he has no Wikipedia page, which is kind of interesting for someone who's been the province's medical officer of health. He's got nothing, not a single thing. So I went through and he's got some stats here, but you know what, if you look at his stats here, prior to ending public health, so he practiced hospital as a GP and an anesthetist, and that's all. So general practitioner and an anesthesiast. So what has that got to do with epidemiology and infectious disease and all that kind of stuff? He's actually done all of this stuff which has to do with being a manager. He's a bureaucrat, period. Not a functioning doctor, as it were. He also has this master's in community health and epidemiology. I couldn't find this, so I'm looking around, but we'll check quickly what the epidemiology is. I had a rough time with my words today, but epidemiology is the study and analysis of the distribution, who, when, and where, patterns and determinants of health and disease conditions in defined populations. Sounds pretty straightforward. It's kind of the idea of what we've got, and it talks about diseases, transmission, causation, outbreak, surveillance, environmental, forensic, so you kind of all across the board there in terms of that. But it's actually even more than that. It's Works into the social sciences, into engineering. The second part here, the term is in zoological, so we're actually do it in terms of the veterinarians. So now we have the term epidemiology is widely applied to cover the description and causation of not only epidemic disease, but of disease in general, non-disease, health-related conditions, high blood pressure, depression. So basically, unless you go into a study, and again, this is my opinion based on the information I saw, unless you go into a field that is directly epidemiology and immunology only, which the University of Toronto does offer, but I don't think that's the one he took because it got a different name, then, quite frankly, you would have some credentials and some street cred, as they say, in terms of dealing with infectious disease and so on and so forth. But this is a general course, and I'll show you how general it is. So this is what I could find at the University of Toronto. This is what he quoted, the MHCSSC. So this program welcomes applications. If you notice here, the only one really that mentions physicians, but everything else is managers, and managers, right? Bureaucrat in this particular case. So the program overview. This looks like it here, MHSC. It's a Master of Health Science, not Masters of, which is a totally different thing altogether. So unless that's just a typo, that's that's not right. Now, you know what else? I forgot to capture on the screen capture. On top of his little blurb, I grabbed that from the province's page. On top of his little blurb, they put a line in there that says this was published or written by a previous government. Really? Now, why would you not go and update that stuff as soon as you come in? Everybody else was updated. Why is his still left over as that? So in case this was caught, they can blame it on somebody else. Is that the idea? I mean, good gravy. These people are shameless. So MHSC, health managers, professionals, they want education and health administration. So this, again, bureaucratic stuff. Even further, so that was a little deeper. I just actually brought this up so we could see it a little closer. The Institute of Health and trains future health leaders and researchers. And here we go, master, not masters in. It's Master of Health Science, and there's no epidemiology behind it. That's the actual letters he's got, but it doesn't say epidemiology. He's the only one that, or whoever put it on the province's page said it. So we have this one here, the Master of Health Sciences. Master. It's not masters. So we get a clinical epidemiology, but the rest is all based on this policy, basically what you would need to be a manager to run some systems and stuff like that. So let's take a look a little closer here at this other one, which I could find because it mentioned community health also in his profile. So that was the MS, although the letters are the same. He's got community health, but again, the same thing. A master, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's what that master's is. I don't know. I have always just seen masters. It was a separate thing, not master of. So I could be very wrong there. Again, it doesn't change the bottom line that he doesn't have much by way of communicable or epidemiological as part of his background. Addictions, mental health, family, practitioner, teacher, occupational, but not a whole lot here in terms of epidemiology. It's just a little closer look at the thingy. So I did find this community health at the University of Toronto, Scarborough campus, epidemiology. And community health, which was a course. Okay, so maybe that's it. But this is only 3 lectures of 2 hours each, so 4. So you basically got 8 hours of lecture and then a bunch of, that's not a field, that's a term, right? So it's just a sideline. So this was the only one I could find, Master of Public Health, but that's MPH in epidemiology, Master of Public Health in epidemiology. I'm not sure if there's different ones of that. But the bottom line is, if you look at this particular guy, and I went for, this is 4 to 5 consecutive terms, this including a summer. This was actually a 2-year, I think, straight up. So you're not doing anything else. You're actually doing this whole thing. I don't think that's what he's got. He's got that other stuff, which was just basically a manager's role, and then they talked about epidemiology. So, he doesn't have a lot of street credit as far as I'm concerned for making these policy decisions. He's a manager, but does he deal with your health and he's going to, force you to take something into your body? Give me a break, man. Go on, beat it. So just, again, back to this whole idea of appeal to authority and the halo effect. We seem to think that in government we have people that are qualified to do the job, but clearly we do not, and I don't know why people refuse to accept this. I don't want these people making decisions for me when they don't know what they're doing. Now, part of the argument would be, well, they hire people underneath them to do, oh, I see, okay, well, that's great. But if the person at the top who's making the decisions doesn't understand what's being told to them by their underlings, then how is that a reliable way to make a decision, especially when it's going to affect your health, your welfare, your family, your money, your wallet, your future, your retirement, everything? No, thank you. You people go on, beat it, because this is absolutely ridiculous. But look at old Dougie Ford here. He co-owns Deco Labels and Tags, a printing business in Canada that was founded by their father. He didn't even start the business. All he did was inherit it. He said very limited political stuff. And as a leader, clearly not. So why? Go on, beat it. Let's look at Christine Elliott. She's also making the decision here. Well, Christine Elliott's a law school? Oh, she's what, the medical minister of health? Minister of Health and Long-Term Care in Ontario. And she's what? A lawyer? Oh, I see. Good. Yeah, that's good to know. This one I threw in here, although he's not directly related because he's had so much goo going on. This guy is an idiot. Yes, Stephen Leachy, you're an idiot. And that's my opinion, but I don't care. This guy, look at, he's a PC, or sorry, not a PC, it doesn't matter what he was doing. I don't care. Again, I'm not a Harper fan by any stretch of the imagination, so anybody's been tainted by Harper is no good in my book. That's just my personal opinion. This guy, let's look a little further. Public relation, he's a media guy. He has nothing, only thing and he's just the education minister in Ontario, if anybody doesn't know that. This is it. The only qualification he has is the fact that he went to school. Oh, and it went to a private school to boot. Really? Oh, a nice little, yeah. You should take the list. There's some pretty big, significant people in the old thingy there. Anyway, yep, he is a public relations guy, media mouthpiece, and he is the education minister in Ontario. Yeah, so no, these people are useless as in their positions. What they're in their real life, I have no idea because I don't know them, but I certainly know that I don't accept them making decisions for me in any stretch of the imagination. So we also have this little thing going on here. This goes back to David Williams, kind of a little bit. It's not going to be mandatory, but it's going to be mandatory business. This is how they game the system, because basically he committed both of these, extortion and intimidation, right there on TV. But they throw this little bit in here that they just throw in at will, right? Lawful authority. Who's lawful authority? Well, we, as the rightful people that make law, government, da-da-da. No, I don't recognize your ability to make law either. I recognize natural law, common law. I don't recognize this crap. So yes, intimidation and extortion are absolutely what you're doing. In our world, is that the case? No, because they game the system by having these little bits and pieces in here that allows them to do it. But if you were to do that to them, yep. And here's the other little trick is moving the goalposts. Here we go. Right, so this is another little thing we try to do. This wasn't enough because, again, the cases business wasn't holding enough. The narrative is falling apart completely globally, and so therefore they have to keep changing the goalposts in order to keep it rolling. So we went from now 100 cases per, again, cases meaning absolutely nothing because it doesn't tell you anything. All it does is tell you that this little thing glowed a color because some genetic material was found. That's all that thing tells you. That is it. Nothing else. It's not a pee stick. It's not like the pregnancy test where you pee on it, it's green and blue or whatever the colors are. That's not how this thing works at all. It's a manufacturing tool, and it also works on cycles. You change the amount of cycles, poof, you can change the results just like that. So if you don't have a standardized cycle, anyway, I've gone into that in my other videos, but you can see how they've just changed this now from 100 cases per 100,000 people to 40 cases. That's our new threshold now, so we can lock you down now. Even I need a nice gig if you can get it. Anyway, let's get on to the vaccine because that's what we want to talk about here. So here we have 95% effective, they claim, and again, I find this highly surprising, and I have to do some far deeper research into this. So we had flu vaccines for a couple of decades now, I suppose. They can barely get them up to 40 to 50%. SARS doesn't even have a vaccine, and this is based on SARS. An argument can be made that there was not the demand for a SARS vaccine because it kind of went and disappeared kind of deal. So, there could be an argument made there. But nonetheless, one would think we would have a SARS vaccine at this point in time, but we don't. And we don't even have really effective influenza vaccines. So in something that's been generated here, or you're claiming it's been generated in a short period of time, who knows? I mean, they could have been working on this forever. I don't know. It's something you haven't been able to do in decades, you can suddenly do in a couple of months. No, thank you. Not interested in your thingy. But it also brings the point, and I will come back to this. Let's remember this, because actually I brought this slide back in, so I'll remember myself too. So anyway, this is from I think I'm going to check that previous slide. I'm pretty sure that was in there. Yeah, the Pfizer and Moderna. So we're going to use the Pfizer one because Canada is using that Pfizer one. So is the UK. And so I can use this documentation from the UK here to talk about the Canada one. But the first one here this is from the healthcare professionals. So this gives you the idea of them, so doctors or whoever's given the shot, I guess, what sort of risks we're looking at in terms of adverse reaction. This one is from the recipient. So this is the one that you would get as a recipient of it if you asked for the paper. So let's look at some of these side effects here. Pain at the injection site, set that aside. That generally happens in any injection. For some people, for others not. Tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, joint fever, nausea, feeling unwell. Those symptoms sound familiar? Sound an awful lot like the flu to me. So why would I then go and get this when it's the same symptoms as I'm going to get if I just get the damn thing in the first place? But there's more to it. We'll come back to that. So anyway, let's do a little bit more. We need to get some more context. There's the word I'm looking for. I use it all the time, and here when I need it, it's gone. So this is basically the same thing. What I've done is all I did was, this is the data that they provide in terms of the big picture stuff. They got all sorts of data that comes out. So the outcome there is not equal to fatal. And the age groups is not in the 90s, the 80s, or the 70s. So this is one high-risk group. This is basically is the WHO, or sorry, I define the high-risk group. Again, it's just me. I just use it as a number because the numbers are all over the place. Some of them go in 5, some of them go in 10s. They start in the middle, they start at the end. It's tough to kind of get some sort of continuity there. So I just put them all kind of in the center there, and away we go. And I use the one that's not the 60s. But I did both at the same. So I guess basically the raw idea, I just need a count of the number. From that table, which is that data that I've imported, the outcome is a field in there, and I'm saying not equals fatal, so I'm just trying to get an idea of what they call the cases. So this is anything that's not fatal, so unresolved is basically what that means. And then the age group not in 90s, 80s, 70s, or 60s. So basically 59 and under, which is what the WHO does. I like to do the 69 and under because the age groups kind of fit a little bit better in terms of how the data is presented, but either way, you can just compare the two. So these are the fatalities. So this is the one that equals fatal. Again, in the same groups, 492 here, 165. So that drops, right? Pretty substantial up in the higher risk. And again, should be no surprise. 165 when we're doing 90s, 80s, 70s, and 60s. So let's look in the high risk cases, and then we look at the high risk. So those are just those two numbers from previous that I brought through. Now, the recovery percentage, right? So we just take our 100 here, we do our calculation times 100. And so in the first group, which is here, you have a 99.55% chance of recovery if you land SARS-CoV-2, whatever it may be. In the other group, the under 60s, you actually have a 99.83% chance of recovery. Boy, it's less than a quarter 1%. Yeah, and here we are shutting down, destroying people's lives like there is no tomorrow for something that you have a 99.83% favorability. And this is the same numbers they are using to justify all this, are the same numbers I use to show them that they're full of shit. They just present it. It's nice you can just present this. The media, they are brutal, absolutely brutal, and they should be turfed, every single one of them. Anyway, I don't want to get rambling on me. So let's look at that quickly. There's the percentage of recovery percentage. Let's go back to here. So 95 to 94. So you're telling me here, folks, and you're suggesting that maybe I don't have to, it's not mandatory, but it might be. I have a 99.83% chance of recovering from this and getting the same symptoms as your side effects are, and you are only claiming 95. Now, exactly why would you want to expect me to take a jab directly into my bloodstream created by people who I don't even know? I don't even know what's in the vial, and these people have been indemnified for being sued. And you want me to put that into my bloodstream when I can actually just suffer this out and stand a better chance? Come on, you give it a break. People are crazy. Anyway, this is back from the list because I want to bring this out. I don't know if they're going to, so I'm going to make sure that I have done my due diligence here to try to bring it, because there are some serious repercussions here that people need to know about, and I don't know. Now, I want you to think back to David Williams talking about schools, right? And he said, you know, we're talking about schools and attendance, he said, at schools, right? So basically, he is inferring or implying, that we may be putting this as part of the vaccination routine for children in order to get into school. Really? To attend school? Because he said attend, right? It was attend. I'm going to go back and check it out. It's attend, but he did reference the school bit there. Safety and efficacy is efficacy. So efficacy. Boy, I gotta get back into my skills. It's been a long time since I've been out of school. I forget all these words. Under 16 years of age. That's an awful lot of school kids there, David Williams. And you want to stick them with a jab, and they haven't even tested this under 16? Arrest. I want you arrested. You're absolutely. Yeah. Pregnancy and breastfeeding. There's currently limited data. So this is actually what the recipient gets. This is pretty important information. You would think it would be a little more detailed. Wait till we see what the doctor gets. Now you're outsourcing this and hoping that they tell you this. But what if it's a nurse kid? What if it's somebody who's just jabbing you? They're already talking about doing it at the, whatchamacallit, the pharmacies. Are they going to give you this information? I don't know. There's currently limited data available on the use of this vaccine in pregnant women. If you are not pregnant or breastfeeding, think you may be pregnant or planning to have a baby after your... Because this is exactly the opposite to what the flu vaccines say. Always. Flu vaccines have been saying for decades now. Decades. I found it in the last 10 years. that it's good. Pregnancy, baby, child, no problem, all's good, away we go, everybody get the flu vaccine, good to go, happy campers. And now suddenly this one, because it is MNRA, which is totally different and has never been tried on humans before, you want to be a guinea pig for these creatures? Yeah, your choice, again, your choice. As a precaution, you should avoid becoming pregnant until at least 2 months after the vaccine. Ask your doctor or your pharmacist for advice. So please do. If you plan on doing this, make sure they tell you this, because this is the doctor's side, or the person here. There is no or limited amount of data from the use of COVID-19 MRA, blah, 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 blah. Animal reproductive toxicity studies have not been completed. Are you kidding me? This is unnormal. They are using you as a guinea pig, and you can't do that. There's a thingy out there in terms of, can't remember the name. I'd have to look back again. I'm not a biology guy. I don't do this stuff. I'm just kind of learning as I go. But I did read that you don't do, the animal stuff needs to be happening first. If it happens at all, like that's kind of got its own connotations. Anyway, not recommended during pregnancy. Pregnancy should be excluded before the vaccination and at least 2 months after, and it is unknown whether COVID-19 is excreted in human milk. A risk to the newborns and infants cannot be excluded, should not be used during breastfeeding. And what the hell is this? It is unknown whether COVID-19 is an impact on fertility. Well, I went back and looked for flu stuff for 10 years. And to see if there was anything on fertility, nothing. It's all good to go, good to go. Now, why suddenly do we have a thing here on fertility? Well, that guy, and I'm going to do another video on him, he's the claims to be Michael Yearden, the former CEO or vice president or something at Pfizer. I'll go down and get all the details on that. But he's actually sent a thing to the EU surveillance thing. They want it stopped. They want a paper pulled down, and they want the vaccine stopped because there's something going on here with a protein that will cause a placenta not to form. So it could basically render you infertile. And this protein spike is apparently in males as well, on male sperm, which could also then render them infertile. Now, there has been I'm not going to use the term, there has been a theory out there that part of this whole thing is part of a population reduction, especially when it's Bill Gates is a well-known eugenist, and his family, his old man was a eugenist as well, and so are some of these other creatures that are involved in this whole thing. You get the Georgia Guidestones things where it's a population of 500 million, So there is some idea there that this whole thing, I didn't spend enough time on it. I'm not of childbearing age or years or even can give children, so it wasn't 100% a focus on me. I had other fish to fry. But you know what? Now that I see this, suddenly it's like, oh, maybe there is something to this. Anyway, I suggest you strongly consider this information here before you get jabbed by an unknown liquid that's being shoved right in your arm, past all of your natural defenses, directly into your bloodstream. You may want to give that a second thought. This is something else I found kind of interesting here too. We've been, told that this is a plague from hell and it's going to kill us all. This has been basically the way it's been going. The same thing with the case stuff. And you notice again the colors that they're using. They use red for the case. Oh, we're all going down here. So I'm curious then, why do we have these drug companies and manufacturers petitioning to get their stuff fast-tracked? Wouldn't you think it would be the other way around? Like, really? If it was as bad as it was, wouldn't you think that governments and whatnots would be begging these people to get their stuff to the table versus the other way around? Just kind of peculiar. I don't know. This is something else that I talk about again in previous stuff, so I don't want to get into it too far, but it is important here with this cycle thing, because this is something that can be done to manipulate your perception of what's going on, because these things are cyclic. So they choose what cycles to run on them, and you just keep going and going and going till you find what you want, if you want, even though it's whatever. Anyway, what happens is they don't record the cycles here, and actually they don't generally do it anywhere else, that they used for the test. Well, that strikes me as something that's kind of critical. Along with the comorbidity business, I want to know what comorbidities were involved and how many cycles you used on this test, because it changes what the reality is based on how many cycles you do. What do they say here? However, in complex laboratory network environments such as Ontario, where specimens may be tested at one of several laboratories, utility of such reporting is questionable? Are you kidding me? Actually, to me, that statement tells me even another reason why we should have the thing, because you're doing it across a whole bunch of different labs using, I'm presumably, again, different manufacturers of tests. I want to know. It doesn't make any... Anyway, it just strikes me as being odd, and that's this... Yeah. Moreover, test results are received and reviewed by a myriad of healthcare providers as well as patients with a varying understanding of CT values. The more cycles you run, the more amplification you have, the more chance you have of amplifying whatever's there. That's difficult? Is that tough? No, it's not. And in fact, I just blew that. I can even, there's videos on YouTube that are even easier to understand than my ranting and raving here. Ridiculous. As such, the inclusion of CT values on laboratory reports issued in Ontario and Canada is not recommended. Excuse me, but you people are full of crap. This was not written by any doctors. I don't think so anyway. This was written clearly by political types or bureaucratic stuff. This whole thing is actually the argument for putting it in there, and they're trying to pitch it as an argument against. Now here we have the first coming out, so that's Florida now has decided, yep, you need to include your cycle threshold values and their reference ranges as applicable must be reported by laboratories to the Florida Department of Health there when they do the test. So they're the first state to come out with the whole thing because it is pertinent information. Gee whiz willikers. So I've talked quickly now too at another, this is a good little trick here. This is a good trick. They're currently using cases, and we saw back there a few slides ago where they've changed the goalposts in the province, and they use this same statistic, this prevalence functionality, but they use it in terms of cases and not in fatalities, right? So it makes very dramatic numbers, and it's all very scary. But the bottom line is fatalities in this particular context are the bottom line. That is the scale in which we need to look at. It's the one metric. Granted, hospitalizations are an important metric. They're a threat, but they're not the actual danger. Quite frankly, fatality is it. Fatality is the end. So let's put this into some perspective because they like to cheat. They being these other, I don't know who they are. I quite frankly don't care, except when it comes to summons time and court time. Then I do care because they need to. Their names need to be on lists. So basically the theory or the formula is you take the number of fatalities and divide by the total population, then you times it by 100,000, which will give you an idea. So what I did here is we took all of the fatalities here in Ontario. Population is estimated to be, because we only have the 2016 census, which is now 4 years out of date. So the estimated population of Ontario is 14 mil there. So I just calculated that out. So in reality here, 26 fatalities per 100,000 people in Ontario. That's not really all that much. In Ontario, I think I checked it was 4 or 5 per 100,000 in automobile fatalities. So actually it was closer to 2, but I'm going to show you why that's important in a second. So we get 26 fatalities per 100,000. So tell me, is that enough to justify? Again, personally, these people have no justification to trounce on mine or your rights any way, shape, or form. Set that aside. Do you believe that that's a justification for this? 26 fatalities out of 100,000 people? Is that justifying shutting down, destroying businesses, destroying people's lives, sending mental health skyrocketing, abuse, suicides, abuse of our kids in the school, like astounding child abuse at a societal level? It's sickening, sickening, sickening. Anyway, 26 fatalities, and of course, we know for sure that there have only been one under 20 in Ontario. So this doesn't even affect the kids, and yet look what we've done to them. And they're not even in this list. I mean, come on. However, one big thing that gets left out of this gig is the long-term care people. They are included in that, but long-term care, you don't circulate in the general population. You tend to have lower functionality in your immune system. You tend to have drug stuff going on, that you're taking all sorts of drug and drug interaction and all sorts of stuff. So that's why you're a vulnerable, high-risk population. That's why they call it that. But they don't circulate in the general population of long-term care because you're in a facility. So while you may be in or out from time to time with family and friends and stuff, that's still very limited. Your trips out are very limited. Your people that you deal with, your family, are very limited. Even if they spread it and talk to other people and so on, it's still a very limited channel. And healthcare, the staff members are also very limited in terms of the big picture. So we can confidently take these folks out of the dynamic because they don't, I don't want to use the phrase they don't count. In statistics here, they don't because they are their own ecosystem. This prevalence deal, assumes, so in this case it's 100,000. It assumes that 100,000 are all homogeneous people, but they're not. People are not. We share a few certain traits and stuff like that, but we are not homogeneous. Our society, homogeneous, homogeneous, however you want to pronounce it, our society, the way you live, your money, your bank account, whatever you do, it's all very different. So therefore, we can't really rely on this 100%, 10%, 2%. Who even knows what this metric will give us if this is not a homogeneous group? Nonetheless, this is what's being presented. Let's look at it. So we have here full-on fatalities in Ontario and population. But let's take long-term care out. So I took the fatalities of long-term care out. That only leaves 1,400 fatalities in Ontario. In case you didn't know that, because the mainstream media will not tell you this, I should say that. They actually have, but it's been buried and around, and it's no sliding here. And then they always make a but a producer, right? So they try to knock down the whole idea. This has been a slaughter in our long-term care facilities. And again, I will keep going because people need to answer for this. And I'm going to do what I can to make sure that happens. So basically, I took out all the long-term care. It was a stat published by the province, so they have all the long-term care items. So I took them out. And then I took our population, and I estimated that 1/4 of the entire population was over, like in the high-risk group. And then I just took 1/3 of that number and just put them into long-term care. I can't find that statistic readily, that how many people are actually in long-term care in Ontario. It may be out there. I might have to find it in 1,000 different sites and add it all up. I just don't have time to do any of that stuff. So I think my estimate there is fairly reasonable, close enough anyway. But look now where it changes this whole thing down to 10. So 10 fatalities per 100,000 people. And again, look what we've done. Look what we are continuing to do. Waterloo Region, as their mask mandate was initiated on July 13th. In September, it was under review. They reviewed it and then extended it to May 31st of 2021. Are you joking me? Good gravy. Now, interestingly enough, the person that runs the show here is a former Liberal. Yep. So anyway, keep on moving along. So yeah, this is basically where we're at. Skip that again. They'll try the case thing. Don't listen to it because it's just garbage. And again, if you don't believe me, I've documented it all right through. It's taking the same numbers, the same stuff. So if you want to take a look at that, fine. If not, then well, that's your choice too. So let's look here at something else that was very interesting, because we're going to just kind of wrap this up now. I'm talking way too long again. This is from the UK, and it's a tender that was put out from their, the Ministry of Health. They have a name for it, actually it's MHRA. So here was what they were looking for. MHRA seeks artificial intelligence software tool to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions. Really? So already they're looking at expected high volume. It doesn't say potential, right? It doesn't say possible. It's expected. Why would they expect a high volume of adverse reaction, right? Because they know. They full well know. Well, we'll see how things are going. Anyway, let's just look at a few things, just points to ponder as we wrap it up here. So how would your perception of the so-called pandemic be if people weren't wearing masks all the time, right? Nice trick there, because it gets you in your face. Not only did they do a good trick there to get people trying to guilt other people into doing it, and again, as I've said repeatedly, and I will continue to say so, anybody that tries to make me wear a mask or whatever, you prove it. You show me, and again, I put it in another article. I'm not going to go down that road again. So yeah, how would your perception be if it wasn't in your face all the time because people are wearing with the masks? I bet it would be just like that. Sure sounds like a good motivation to assist with pushing and maintaining an agenda, doesn't it? So to these folks who are blindly wearing their masks and feel the need to tell others to do the same, is it a virus you're afraid of, or is it a fear of not conforming that's driving that whole thing? Either way, keep your mouth shut. I'm not interested in hearing your crap. And you know, to say that pretty harsh. I've had enough. I have had enough of this bull crap. I've had enough of these people running around with nothing. You know, it's equivalent to, I've spent an awful lot of time researching all of this stuff, and then I get the equivalent of K as a response back to the text, you know, the whole thing. So no, I'm done being Mr. Nice Guy. I am a kind individual, but I am no longer going to be a nice, people-pleasing individual. I'm done with that. So therefore, from here on in, it is absolutely, you prove it to me. You prove to me and show me, then maybe we'll talk. So anyway, we have in Canada here, unless one is in long-term care, the chances of perishing from the SARS-CoV-2 infiltration are statistically insignificant. But once a vaccine is injected into your body, there's no turning back. So would it be not more prudent to wait until more study has been completed? Yep. So this is not the right way to do things. This is the wrong way to do things. You want to know the right way to do things? This is the right way to do things. This will end up here. And that's exactly how that will go. Thanks for your time.